The redhead murders refer to a series of unsolved homicides involving women with red or reddish hair, predominantly occurring in the United States during the early to mid-1980s. These murders spanned across multiple states and shared common patterns and victim profiles. The victims, often found along major highways, were primarily young women who lived transient lifestyles, making it challenging to quickly identify them and trace their last movements. Today, this case is sort of half solved. There is one man that everyone pretty much agrees is responsible for a few of the deaths. But on the other hand, there are many victims that are tied to these murders who are still unidentified. The redhead murders are believed to have started in the late 1970s and continued through the mid-1980s. The states included are Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi, and West Virginia. And since most of these murders occurred on or near highways, many believe that the culprit was a truck driver or someone who had to travel frequently. Many of the victims were hitchhikers, workers, or nomads. Often these women were not reported missing immediately, and the lack of identification documents made it difficult for authorities to identify them quickly. Their bodies were typically found in isolated rural areas near major highways, often wrapped in blankets or bound with duct tape. The deaths were usually caused by strangulation or suffocation. Although not all of the victims showed signs of sexual assault, it is believed that the primary motive was in nature. Recognizing the similarities among the cases, law enforcement agencies from multiple states began collaborating to share information and strategies. In April 1985, representatives from Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania met with the FBI to discuss the murders. This summit aimed to determine if the murders were the work of a single serial killer and to develop an approach to the investigation where all groups' resources can be optimally utilized. Among the identified victims are names including Lisa Nichols, Tina Farmer, Michelle Inman, S.B. Pilgrim, and Tracy Walker. Lisa Nichols, a 28-year-old woman, is one of the earliest known victims associated with the murders. Her body was discovered on September 16, 1984, along Interstate 40 in West Memphis, Arkansas. The discovery site was a remote area near a major highway. She was found wrapped in a blanket and bound with duct tape, indicating that she had likely been restrained and transported to the site. Her body also showed signs of strangulation. Despite an immediate investigation, it was tough to pinpoint the victim's last movements due to her transient lifestyle. It's believed that she was hitchhiking or secured a ride at a truck stop. There were no witnesses or physical evidence to assist in the case. Tina Farmer's body was found on January 1st, 1985, along Interstate 75 in Campbell County, Tennessee. Tina was also bound and strangled. Her remains were found in an advanced state of decomposition. With her body, officials retained DNA evidence that was not of immediate use due to technological limitations at the time, but this evidence would later become very important. The location where Michelle Inman's body was found was also near a major highway. She was 23 years old and from Nashville, Tennessee. Michelle was found in July of 1983. Then in April 1985, S.B. Pilgrim's remains were discovered inside a refrigerator along Route 25 in Gray, Kentucky. This unusual detail made S.B.'s case more notable among the previous victims. She was discovered nude except for socks and some jewelry with signs of suffocation. The refrigerator had a decal reading Superwoman as well. S.B. was identified via DNA matching her daughter, who reported her missing several years earlier. As for Tracy Walker's date of discovery, it isn't well kept, but it's believed to have been in the 1980s as well. Her remains were significantly decomposed, but due to her red hair, she was linked to the other murders. And these are only the victims who were able to be identified. There are approximately another dozen unidentified victims who share similar characteristics as those who have already been identified. As for the DNA that was found on Tina's body, it later led to a man named Jerry Leon Johns. While he was directly tied to Tina and identified as her killer, it was still difficult to concretely link Johns to the other murders. Jerry Leon Johns was a truck driver with a history of violent crimes. He was born in the mid-1940s. His occupation as a long-haul truck driver placed him near the locations where many of the redhead murders victims were found. In the mid-1980s, he was convicted for the attempted murder of Linda Shack. Linda's case shared a lot of striking similarities to the redhead murders. Most of John's crimes were focused on women. His modus operandi typically involved luring victims under false pretenses, restraining them, and then attempting to kill them. In March 1985, Linda, a dancer with red hair, reported to the police that Johns had tried to strangle her to death with her own torn shirt. Johns dumped her on the side of Interstate 40 in Knox County, Tennessee, believing she had died. She survived the attack and provided a detailed account to the authorities, leading to John's arrest. He was subsequently convicted of attempted murder based on Linda's testimony and the physical evidence. This crime was similar due to the use of strangulation, disposal of the body near a highway, and Linda's red hair. Behavioral analysts and criminal psychologists have attempted to construct a psychological profile of the culprit of the redhead murders. The perpetrator is believed to have exhibited traits commonly associated with serial killers, including a desire for control and domination over the victims. The choice of victims with red hair and the method of strangulation suggest a specific fetish or compulsion. Johns' criminal history and behavior align with several aspects of this profile. His job as a truck driver provided him with the mobility and opportunity to commit murders across multiple states. The violent and methodical nature of his attack on Linda, coupled with the forensic link to Tina Farmer, supports the theory that Johns could be the man responsible for the redhead murders. Today, the full extent of Jerry Johns' involvement in the series of killings is unknown. He died in prison in 2015 while serving time. Furthermore, the vast majority of the victims remain unidentified. Despite the similarities between the murders, there are some people who believe that most of them are unrelated, and instead it's a mix of several different people who are responsible for the killings. The Codex Gigas, commonly known as the Devil's Bible, is one of the most intriguing manuscripts from the medieval period. Its massive size, unique content, and the legends surrounding its creation have been a talking point among scholars and the public for centuries. Aside from its contents, its sheer size is already extraordinary. Measuring approximately 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 8.7 inches thick, it weighs around 165 pounds. The manuscript consists of 310 vellum leaves made from the skins of about 160 donkeys or calves. These details alone set it apart from other medieval manuscripts. This codex is regarded as more than just a large book. It is a comprehensive compilation of various texts. It contains the full Latin Vulgate Bible, making it a significant religious document. However, it also includes several other important texts. These range from the Chronicle of Bohemia, medical knowledge, spells, texts of exorcisms, other supernatural documents, and works such as the Antiquities of the Jews. But the most striking details are the full-page illustrations that the book contains, the most famous being the portrait of the devil. The Codex Gigas is steeped in legends, the most famous of which involves its creation. According to popular lore, the manuscript was created by a monk named Hermann the Recluse. Hermann allegedly broke his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. To avoid this, he promised to create a book that would glorify the monastery's library and include all human knowledge in a single night. Realizing that this was impossible, Hermann made a pact with the devil. The devil completed the manuscript in exchange for Hermann's soul. The large portrait of the devil within the codex is said to be a tribute to this deal, but again, this is simply a legend rather than a fact. Another legend suggests that the manuscript was created as a form of penance. Medieval belief held that copying holy texts could atone for sins. Some speculate that the monk behind the Codex Gigas was seeking redemption with this daunting task. Numerous theories have been proposed to explain the Codex Gigas' creation and purpose. Some scholars believe it was intended as a symbol of devotion to God, while others suggest it was just a source of knowledge, preserving various texts for future generations. The inclusion of medical texts, historical records, and magic spells suggests that the manuscript aimed to cover a wide range of knowledge. The inclusion of the devil's image raises many questions. Some interpret the image as a warning against temptation and evil, while others believe it may have had symbolic or ritualistic undertones. Many also say that the Codex Gigas is rather boring and has only been over-sensationalized because of that devil image. Modern research has focused on its creation, contents, and historical significance. Studies have shown that the manuscript was likely written by a single scribe, based on the uniformity of the handwriting throughout the text. The time required to complete such a manuscript, even working continuously, would have been immense. Estimates suggest it would have taken at least 5 years of continuous writing to complete, with some scholars arguing it could have taken up to 20 years if the scribe worked only a few hours each day. The materials used also fascinate historians. The vellum used is of exceptionally high quality, and portions are richly colored with pigments that would have been expensive and difficult to obtain in the medieval period. The Count of Saint Germain has fueled an immense amount of debate for centuries. He is renowned for his talents, mysterious origins, and legends suggesting he may have discovered the secret to immortality. Born into obscurity, the Count first appeared in European society in the early 18th century, where his prodigious talents and persona quickly gained him a mysterious reputation. He claimed to possess ancient wisdom, including the ability to transform base metals into gold and create elixirs that could prolong life. Much about the Count of Saint Germain remains uncertain despite his historical footprint. Various accounts of his life contradict each other, and the scarcity of concrete evidence has only fueled the theories about his true identity and purpose. One widely accepted theory on his background suggests that the Count was born in the late 17th century, possibly around 1691 or 1710. Some suggest he was born in Transylvania, while others claim he was from Portugal or Hungary. One prevalent theory suggests that the Count was the son of Prince Ferenc Rákóczi II of Transylvania, an exiled Hungarian noble. This theory is supported by the claim that the Count was highly educated and possessed the refined manners of European aristocracy. Ferenc Rákóczi II was a prominent figure in Hungarian history, leading an uprising against the Habsburgs and subsequently living in exile. It is proposed that the Count's real name might have been Leopold George, the youngest son of Rákóczi, who was raised in secrecy to protect him from political enemies. Another theory proposed by some historians is that the Count was the son of a Portuguese Jew named Aimar de Betmeran. This theory suggests that his family fled from the Inquisition, which would explain his extensive travels and the necessity of changing his identity. This background would also account for his vast knowledge of various cultures and languages, as his family would have had to adapt to different regions across Europe. Aside from these more conventional theories, there are claims that the Count's origins are of a more mystical nature. Some believe he was the reincarnation of ancient figures or had access to ancient esoteric knowledge passed down through secret societies such as the Rosicrucians or the Freemasons. These claims are certainly a bit more fantastical, but they further add to the legend. The Count of Saint Germain's most significant and well-documented interactions occurred at the court of King Louis XV of France. Arriving at the French court around 1748, the Count quickly became close with the king and his courtiers through his wit and charisma. His close relationship with King Louis XV was regarded as the pinnacle of his public life. He became one of the king's favorite friends and advisors. Saint-Germain's role at the French court served multiple purposes. He was involved in various diplomatic missions, often acting as an unofficial envoy for the king. He was reportedly sent on secret missions to England to negotiate peace and foster diplomatic relations. One of the most detailed and insightful accounts of the Count of Saint-Germain comes from Horace Walpole, a British writer and politician. Walpole first encountered the Count in London in the mid-1740s and later described him in his letters and memoirs. He characterized Saint-Germain as a man of quality with extraordinary linguistic abilities and a profound knowledge of various sciences. According to Walpole, the Count spoke Italian and French with ease, although neither was his native tongue, and he quickly learned to understand Polish and English. One of the most widely recognized aspects of the Count of Saint-Germain's talents was his musical ability. He was an accomplished violinist and composer. Saint-Germain's musical talents were highly regarded by his contemporaries, including King Louis XV, who reportedly enjoyed his performances immensely. But even above music, the Count is perhaps best known for his knowledge of alchemy. Alchemy was a field that sought to transform base metals into gold and discover the elixir that would grant immortality. While there is no concrete evidence to support his claims, alchemy plays a significant role in the Count's legend. Additionally, Saint-Germain claimed to possess the Philosopher's Stone, a mythical substance central to alchemical traditions. This claim, along with his reported ability to create gold and precious gems, fueled rumors of his supernatural abilities. Although skeptics thought this was all BS, many of his contemporaries were convinced of his powers. Dulce Maria Alavez, a 5-year-old girl from Bridgeton, New Jersey, disappeared on September 16, 2019 while playing in a park. Her sudden disappearance sparked a massive search and widespread media attention. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement and the community, Dulce remains missing. On the warm afternoon of September 16, 2019, Dulce Maria Alavez's family decided to spend some time at Bridgeton City Park, a popular local spot for families. Dulce, her 3-year-old brother, and an 8-year-old family friend went to the park with Dulce's mother, Noema Alavez Perez. As the children played on the playground, Noema stayed in her car, parked approximately 30 yards away with her younger sister, who was helping with some homework. Around 4:20 p.m., Noema noticed that Dulce was no longer visible. Initially thinking that Dulce might be hiding or playing out of sight, she began to search the immediate area but quickly grew worried when she couldn't find her daughter. Noema's panic increased as minutes passed without any sign of Dulce. She then called police to report her daughter missing. Officers arrived at the scene to begin an extensive search of the park and its surroundings. They interviewed park visitors and residents nearby, hoping to gather any information that could lead to the child's whereabouts. The search efforts intensified quickly. Officers canvassed the park, nearby wooded areas, and bodies of water using ground search teams and aerial support with thermal imaging technology. Despite the extensive search, no immediate clues surfaced regarding Dulce's location. The day after her disappearance, an Amber Alert was issued, providing the public with information about Dulce and a potential suspect. The alert described a light-skinned Hispanic male around 5 feet 6 inches tall. He had been seen leading a young girl to a red van. This description was based on witness reports from the park. In the days following the issuance of the Amber Alert, local police, the FBI, and countless volunteers from the community continued their search for Dulce. Despite their efforts, no immediate breakthroughs occurred, leaving the community in a state of anxious uncertainty. The initial days following the disappearance saw a lot of activity. Law enforcement officials released surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store showing Dulce on the day she vanished. This footage showed the girl in a yellow shirt with an elephant on the front, black and white pants, and white sandals. Witnesses were also urged to check their phones for any photos or videos taken in the park around the time of the disappearance, hoping to uncover potential leads. But the investigation struggled to make significant progress. To aid in the ongoing search, the FBI and local authorities periodically released age progression photos of Dulce. These images, created by forensic artists, showed how Dulce might look as she grew older. The first age progression photo was released about a year after her disappearance, depicting her as a 6-year-old. Subsequent photos have continued to update her appearance. These photos have been crucial in maintaining public awareness and generating new leads, as they help the public visualize how Dulce might appear today. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit also contributed by developing profiles of potential suspects. In the years since Dulce's disappearance, investigators have continued to follow up on new leads and tips. These efforts have included traveling out of state to pursue potential sightings and working with international agencies when necessary. The Falcon Lake incident, which occurred on May 20th, 1967 near Falcon Lake in Manitoba, Canada, is one of the better documented and widely debated UFO encounters. This event centers on an industrial mechanic and amateur geologist named Stefan Michalak. Stefan reported a close encounter with a UFO that left him with severe physical injuries. The incident drew extensive attention from the media and the public and prompted serious investigations by both Canadian and American authorities. Stefan Michalak was born in Poland and immigrated to Canada after World War II. He settled in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where he worked as an industrial mechanic. Michalak's technical skills and perfectionist nature earned him a reputation as a reliable and competent man. These qualities also extended to his passion for geology, where his careful approach and keen observational skills made him a successful amateur geologist. His interest in geology often took him into the wilderness around Falcon Lake, where he would search for valuable minerals such as quartz and silver. On May 20th, 1967, Michalak embarked on a routine prospecting trip near Falcon Lake in Manitoba. Michalak had frequently visited the area, so he had a thorough knowledge of the terrain. That day, however, his usual trip took an unexpected and shocking turn. As Michalak explored the wilderness, he suddenly noticed 2 cigar-shaped objects descending from the sky. The objects appeared to hover momentarily before one landed on a flat rock approximately 150 feet away from where he stood. Initially, Michalak assumed the objects were experimental military aircraft. Driven by curiosity and a sense of duty to help potential distressed pilots, Michalak approached the landed craft. The craft was disc-shaped, metallic, and emitted a soft glow. Its exterior was smooth and seamless with no visible rivets or welds. One particularly striking feature was a door that appeared open. Michalak claimed that he could hear muffled voices through it. He called out in English, Russian, and Polish, hoping to communicate with whoever might be inside. Despite his attempts, there was no response from the craft's occupants. Michalak reached out to touch the craft. He noted a grid-like pattern of holes on its surface, arranged in a precise and orderly fashion. As his gloved hand made contact with the object, he was suddenly blasted with a forceful jet of hot air or gas from these holes. The intense heat and pressure knocked him to the ground, and his clothes immediately caught fire. In a state of shock and pain, Michalak managed to extinguish the flames by tearing off his burning shirt. The craft then began to ascend, emitting a loud whirring noise before it disappeared into the sky. Upon seeking medical attention, it became clear that his injuries were severe and consistent with his account of being exposed to a hot, noxious gas. Michalak suffered from first and second degree burns on his chest and abdomen, which were arranged in a distinctive grid pattern that matched the exhaust vents of the craft he described. Doctors at the Misericordia Hospital in Winnipeg treated Michalak for his burns and noted other symptoms indicative of a severe physical reaction. Michalak experienced intense nausea, headaches, weight loss, and general malaise, which persisted for weeks. Despite thorough medical examinations, the exact cause of his symptoms remained unknown, though radiation poisoning was considered a possibility given the nature of his injuries and the subsequent findings at the site. Michalak's shirt and glove, both damaged during the encounter, were preserved as physical evidence. In the aftermath of the incident, investigators from multiple agencies, including the RCMP, the RCAF, and the United States Air Force, visited the site. Their investigations included the collection of soil and vegetation samples. Notably, they discovered a piece of radioactive metal melted into a rock at the landing site. The presence of this radioactive material was unusual and made the case all the more intriguing. The landing site itself showed signs of disturbance. Investigators noted that the area where the craft had landed had no moss or vegetation, which was a stark contrast to the surrounding area. This patch suggested that something weird had indeed occurred there, and Michalak was telling the truth. Initially, the official response from the Canadian government regarding the Falcon Lake incident was dismissive. Authorities suggested that the event might have been a hoax or a misidentification of a conventional aircraft. This skepticism was not unusual for the time, as the 1960s saw many UFO reports that were often quickly debunked or ignored by the government. The public, however, was slower to dismiss Michalak's detailed and disturbing account. As public pressure and interest from UFO enthusiasts grew, the government started to shift its stance. Various governmental departments started to take Michalak's claims more seriously. This was in large part due to the physical evidence and the unexplained nature of his injuries. Declassified documents from years later revealed the extent to which the Canadian government and other investigative groups had been involved in the case behind the scenes. These declassified documents indicated that the incident had indeed been the subject of serious investigation. Despite the substantial physical evidence and Stefan Michalak's credible testimony, the Falcon Lake incident, understandably, has attracted a lot of skepticism. One of the primary arguments is that Michalak might have encountered a military aircraft. Given the period during which the incident occurred, the 1960s saw a lot of testing of equipment in remote areas. Skeptics suggest that Michalak may have stumbled upon a secret military exercise or an experimental aircraft leading to his encounter. The hot gas or air blast he experienced could have been the result of a jet engine or exhaust from such a craft. Another explanation posited is that Michalak might have been the victim of a natural phenomenon, such as ball lightning. Ball lightning is a rare and poorly understood atmospheric electrical phenomenon that can produce intense heat and light. Skeptics argue that Michalak could have witnessed ball lightning, which might explain the burns and the environmental impact observed at the site. Some skeptics have gone further, suggesting that the entire incident might have been a hoax created by Michalak himself. This theory is often supported by pointing out potential motivations, such as seeking attention or financial gain. However, this explanation is weakened by several factors. Michalak was known to be a serious and credible individual with no history of making sensational claims. Moreover, the severe and painful injuries he sustained, along with his consistent and detailed testimony, make it unlikely that he would have deliberately inflicted such harm upon himself for benefits. Despite these alternative explanations, none have been able to fully account for all aspects of the Falcon Lake incident. The death of 16-year-old Elsie Walker in 1928 has stunned and confused the public and investigators for decades. Despite extensive inquiries and public interest, the circumstances surrounding her death remain unresolved. There is suspicion that her cousin William Bailey may have played a role. This cousin was also later convicted of another heinous crime, making him look all the more suspicious. Elsie Walker was born into a typical New Zealand family in the early 20th century. By the time of her death, she was living with her uncle and aunt in Papamoa, a rural area near Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty region. Elsie was described as a normal, well-behaved teenager known for her cheerful attitude and good manners. She was not known to have any history of running away or being involved in any rambunctious activities, which made her sudden disappearance on October 1st, 1928, all the more shocking to her family and community. In Papamoa, Elsie attended the local school and participated in community activities. She was a well-liked student, and her life was typical of many rural New Zealand teenagers of the time, centered around family, school, and community. Papamoa during the 1920s was a small, close-knit community primarily engaged in farming and agriculture. The people of Papamoa were known for their camaraderie and support towards one another. The Walker family was well integrated into this community. Elsie's uncle and aunt, with whom she lived, were respected members of the local society. They were known for their hospitality and involvement. On the morning of October 1st, 1928, Elsie Walker left her uncle and aunt's home without telling anyone where she was going. It was a seemingly ordinary day, and she did not inform anyone of specific plans. Her family grew increasingly worried when she did not return home by evening. Given her regular and predictable routine, her failure to come back was immediately alarming. Her family searched the immediate vicinity, questioning neighbors and checking common places she might visit. As the hours passed with no sign of Elsie, the family notified the local authorities and a more extensive search was initiated. The Papamoa community quickly got involved in the search. Search parties were organized, comprising family members, neighbors, and local volunteers. They scoured the surrounding farmlands, forests, and any areas where she might have wandered. Despite these extensive efforts, there were no immediate clues about Elsie's whereabouts. The lack of any substantial leads in the early stages of the search added to the growing anxiety and fear among her family. On October 5th, 5 days after Elsie disappeared, her body was discovered in a disused quarry in Tamaki, a suburb of Auckland, approximately 200 miles away from Papamoa. The discovery was made by a group of schoolboys who stumbled upon her body while exploring the area. The location where her body was left confused investigators, given this was a considerable distance from where she had disappeared. The initial examination of the body revealed no visible signs of violence. However, a subsequent medical examination uncovered a fractured skull. The cause of death remained undetermined, with pathologists ruling out natural causes but unable to specify whether the blow to the head was accidental or homicidal. The police cordoned off the area and began a thorough search for any clues that might indicate what had happened to her. The quarry where Elsie's body was found was scoured for evidence. Investigators looked for any signs of a struggle, footprints, or other physical evidence that might shed light on how she ended up there. However, the crime scene did not yield any substantial clues. The fractured skull was the only significant finding from the initial examination, but it did not provide enough information as to the specifics of Elsie's death. A coroner's inquest was held in January 1929 to examine the circumstances surrounding Elsie Walker's death. The inquest was highly publicized and attended by many. The inquest aimed to determine the cause of death and whether any foul play was involved. During it, various witnesses were called to testify, including family members, neighbors, and medical experts. The coroner, F.K. Hunt, attempted to piece together the limited evidence available. The medical examination had revealed a fractured skull, but there were no definitive signs of violence or struggle on Elsie's body. One of the key figures in the investigation was William Alfred Bailey, Elsie's cousin. Bailey's involvement in the case drew significant attention due to his later conviction for the murders of Samuel and Christabel Lakey in 1933. At the time of Elsie's disappearance and death, Bailey was thoroughly investigated by the police. His testimony and alibi were scrutinized, and his movements during the period of Elsie's disappearance were closely examined. Despite thorough investigations, no concrete evidence linked him to Elsie's death, and he was never charged. However, his later criminal activities and conviction for the Lakey murders kept him in the public and police spotlight as a potential suspect in Elsie's case. The disappearance of the Gill family from Entre Rios province, Argentina on January 13, 2002 remains one of the most puzzling cases in the country's history. The family of 6, comprising of Ruben Mencho Gill, his wife Margarita Gallegos, and their 4 children, Maria Ofelia, Osvaldo Jose, Sofia Margarita, and Carlos Daniel, vanished without a trace. The Gill family lived in the rural area of La Candelaria Estancia, located in Entre Rios province. Ruben Gill, known locally as Mencho, worked as a farmhand on the estate owned by Alfonso Goet. Described as a hardworking and sociable individual, Ruben was well-liked within the community. His wife Margarita worked at a local school. The couple's children were all known to be cheerful and well-behaved. The family's life in La Candelaria appeared to be normal. However, in the days leading up to their disappearance, some neighbors noted a change in Ruben's demeanor. Normally described as happy and talkative, Ruben was seen as unusually quiet and pensive. This shift in behavior, coupled with the family's sudden and complete disappearance, raised immediate concerns among those who knew them. On January 13, 2002, the Gills seemingly vanished from their home. They left behind all their possessions, including money and important documents, which made the idea of a voluntary departure highly unlikely. Additionally, Margarita had not collected her recent salary from her job at the school, further suggesting that their disappearance was not planned. When family members, specifically Ruben's sister Luisa Gill, reported their absence to the police, it marked the beginning of a long and complex investigation. Concerned about her brother and his family's sudden and complete lack of communication, Luisa approached the local authorities in Viale, a town in the Entre Rios province, to file a missing persons report. The police initially responded by classifying the case as a standard missing persons investigation. But as details emerged, it became clear that this was no ordinary case. The case was initially placed under the jurisdiction of Justice Jorge Sebastian Galino. Early on, the lack of immediate leads and the apparent absence of any obvious reason for the family's disappearance confused investigators. Despite conducting initial searches of the family's home and surrounding property, no significant evidence was uncovered that could provide clues to their whereabouts or explain the circumstances of their disappearance. In the initial months following the disappearance, local police and investigators conducted several searches of La Candelaria Estancia, where the Gill family resided. These searches aimed to uncover evidence that might indicate foul play or suggest a direction for digging further. However, these early efforts yielded little information and the case grew cold. The investigation received renewed attention in 2003 when Justice Galino ordered a more thorough examination of the family's home and surrounding areas. This decision was influenced by the persistent efforts of the Gill family's relatives, who continued to push for a deeper investigation. The searches during this period included interviews with neighbors and other residents and a review of the family's financial and personal records. Unfortunately, these efforts did not result in any significant breakthroughs. One of the first major comprehensive searches of La Candelaria Estancia occurred in 2008. This search was more extensive and utilized advanced forensic techniques in an attempt to uncover hidden evidence. Investigators raised floorboards, dug wells, and employed luminol, a chemical that glows blue when it comes into contact with blood, to detect any traces of blood that might not be visible to the naked eye. During this search, several blood samples were found. However, subsequent genetic testing revealed that these samples did not match the genetic profiles of the Gill family. This finding suggested that the blood could have been from another source or that the samples had been contaminated over time. The contamination could have been due to various factors, including environmental exposure or mishandling during the collection process. Additionally, flies around the areas where blood was detected raised suspicions. Flies are often attracted to human cadavers, and their presence suggests that there might have been human decomposition at some point. Despite this, no human remains were found during the search, leaving investigators without concrete evidence to support the theory of foul play. In 2015, the case was transferred to Judge Gustavo Acosta, who, along with prosecutor Federico Uriburu, decided to restart the investigation with a fresh perspective. This transfer marked another significant phase in the investigation, as the new judicial team brought renewed energy and resources to the case. One of the first actions of Judge Acosta and prosecutor Uriburu was re-examining the evidence and conducting new searches of the property. They employed modern technology, including drones, to photograph and survey the area. These aerial photographs were compared with satellite images from 2002 to identify any changes in the landscape that might indicate disturbed soil or hidden graves. No new evidence was found that could conclusively explain the disappearance. Throughout the investigation, Alfonso Goet, the owner of La Candelaria Estancia, remained a person of interest. Goet's actions and statements raised suspicions, particularly his report of the family's disappearance 3 months after it occurred. Goet claimed that the Gills had left for a vacation, which was inconsistent with his usual practice of granting only short leaves to his workers. During the 2008 search, investigators found that the mattresses in the Gill family's home had been burned and were stained with blood. Goet's explanation for this was that he had burned the mattresses because they were old and dirty, but this did not account for the presence of blood. These inconsistencies, along with Goet's strained relationship with Ruben, led many to suspect his involvement in the family's disappearance. However, despite multiple searches of his property and intense scrutiny, no concrete evidence was found to implicate him in the crime directly. Goet's death in a car accident in 2016 further complicated the investigation. Some believe that he might have taken crucial information to his grave. In February 2018, another significant search operation was conducted following a lead from Armando Nani, a rural contractor who claimed to have seen Ruben Gill expressing concerns about wells he had been ordered to dig shortly before the family's disappearance. This search included inspecting a water well on the property, but only animal bones were found. Armando also mentioned a stream on the property, which was to be investigated pending judicial approval. This search operation involved a team of firefighters who investigated the stream, looking for any signs of human remains or other evidence. The search did not yield any new findings. Yet again, resources were spent without any meaningful results. The psychological state of the family, particularly Ruben Gill, was also a point of investigation. Witnesses reported that Ruben had appeared unusually troubled in the days leading up to the disappearance. This change in behavior was noted by neighbors and colleagues who described him as typically happy and sociable. The investigation included a psychological autopsy, through which a forensic psychologist concluded that the Gills had no psychological or religious motives to sever ties with their loved ones. However, the psychologist noted that Ruben's altered demeanor might have indicated underlying stress or concerns that were not outwardly apparent. The investigation also considered sociological factors, such as the family's relationship with the local community and their social standing. The Gills were known to be relatively private, with limited interaction with other families in the area. This isolation, combined with the rural setting, may have contributed to the difficulty in gathering information and understanding the full context of their disappearance. On November 10, 1951, Kenneth Jr., David, and Danny Klein left their home in Minneapolis's North Side neighborhood to play at Farview Park, located just a few blocks away. The boys were dressed for the cold weather, with Kenneth Jr. in a red jacket and red stocking cap, David in a blue jacket, and Danny in a red snowsuit. Their older brother Gordon was supposed to meet them at the park after finishing a project, but found no sign of them when he arrived. The boys' ages ranged from Kenneth being 8 and Danny being the youngest at 4. When the boys did not return home by evening, their parents, Betty and Kenneth Sr., grew increasingly worried and contacted the Minneapolis police. At that time, it was standard procedure for police to wait 24 hours before launching a full-scale search for missing persons. Despite this, family members and neighbors began an immediate search, calling out the boys' names and checking with friends and relatives. The following day, the police initiated a more thorough investigation. Search efforts were focused around Farview Park and the nearby Mississippi River. Volunteers, police officers, and firefighters combed the area, but their initial searches yielded nothing. Tracking dogs were brought in and traced the boys' scent to the river's edge, raising fears that they had fallen into the water. During the search, 2 hats that the boys had been wearing were found near the Mississippi River, close to a dam. This discovery heightened concerns that the boys had drowned. Additionally, 2 Roman Catholic catechisms belonging to the boys were found on a brush pile near the riverbank. Despite extensive searches, including lowering the water level and using boats, divers, and even airplanes, no further evidence was found. The search was called off on November 16th, just 6 days after the boys had disappeared. The police concluded that the boys had likely drowned, although no bodies were ever recovered. Kenneth Sr. and Betty Klein refused to accept the police's conclusion without more definitive evidence. From the moment the police called off the official search, the Klein family took matters into their own hands. Kenneth and Betty initiated their search operations. They organized neighborhood search parties, scouring parks, backyards, and riverbanks, hoping to find any clues that might lead to their sons. They knocked on doors, spoke to anyone who might have seen or heard something, and followed up on every potential lead, no matter how small. The family's home became a central hub for the search efforts. They set up a command center in their living room, complete with maps, photographs, and a log of all the tips and sightings reported by the public. Betty Klein carefully documented every detail, ensuring that no piece of information was overlooked. Determined to keep the case in the public eye, the Klein family placed numerous advertisements in local newspapers. These ads often featured photographs of Kenneth Jr., David, and Danny, alongside heartfelt pleas for information. The advertisements offered rewards for any leads that could help locate the boys, hoping to incentivize people to come forward with useful information. Over the years, various theories have emerged regarding the disappearance of the Klein brothers. These range from accidental drowning to foul play. Each theory has been scrutinized by investigators, the media, and the public, but none have conclusively solved the mystery. We already mentioned the first one, that being drowning, but the lack of physical evidence does lead to skepticism. Another theory is that the Klein brothers were abducted. This theory gained traction over the years as the accidental drowning scenario seemed less plausible. The idea that the boys were taken by someone, either a stranger or someone they knew, has been explored extensively by investigators and the media. One of the more disturbing theories involves the possibility of foul play by someone the boys knew. Some evidence suggests that the boys' trail did not end at the river, but rather near the Northside police station. This discrepancy has led to speculation that the boys might have been abducted and taken elsewhere. This theory is bolstered by reports that the tracking dogs followed the boys' scent to locations away from the river, including near the police station. A particularly controversial aspect is the potential involvement or negligence of local law enforcement. There have been claims that the initial investigation was not thorough enough and that important evidence might have been overlooked or mishandled. The fact that the case was closed so quickly without conclusive evidence has led some to question whether there was a cover-up or a failure to adequately investigate certain leads.